Brazil is often associated with samba, attractive women, vibrant cities, and spectacular landscapes. However, this idyllic image contrasts with a less publicized reality. The country, internationally known for its culture of love and peace, faces significant challenges exacerbated by questionable government policies. Poverty is on the rise, with a growing number of people struggling for clean water, food, and shelter on the streets. The job market is shrinking, and many workers can barely support their families with their wages. Personal debt is high, and corruption scandals tarnish the country's image. This duality between international perception and Brazil's internal reality reveals the complexity of a country loved by many, but also marked by deep difficulties and inequalities. Today we explore the true face of Brazil, beyond the stereotypes and images sold to the world. Brazil's history begins in the era of great maritime explorations, led by Portugal in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. During this time, in 1500, Portuguese navigator Pedro Álvares Cabral reached what we now know as Brazil, although he was seeking a maritime route to the Indies. This event, often described as a discovery by accident, marked the beginning of Portuguese colonization in the region. Interestingly, the arrival of the Portuguese in Brazil did not reveal uninhabited lands. On the contrary, they encountered various indigenous peoples who had been living in these lands for millennia. Cabral's initial misunderstanding, believing he had reached the Indies, led to the naming of these native peoples as Indians, a term that persists to this day. The narrative of Brazilian history begins with the arrival of the Portuguese, which ushered in an era of intense exploration. This country, once peaceful and distant from global turmoil, found itself immersed in a wave of unrestrained exploitation, both of its natural resources and its people. The ambition of the Portuguese rulers was so great that it turned Brazil into a vast colonial empire, built upon the suffering of a people who had previously lived in isolation. This isolation, on the other hand, caught the attention of the Catholic Church, which saw here a fertile ground for the spread of the faith. Priests, including Jesuits and Franciscans, were sent on missions of evangelization. The indigenous peoples, who were already facing the loss of their lands, were also subjected to an intense process of religious conversion, adopting European beliefs and customs, especially Portuguese ones. Brazil, thus, was not just another conquered land, but a true treasure for the Portuguese crown, a goose that laid the golden eggs. The natural wealth of Brazil was so vast that even its early explorers could hardly quantify it. Among the various resources, gold and Brazil wood stood out, being intensely exploited. Brazil wood in particular was so emblematic that it gave its name to the country, a name that over time became synonymous with prominence in various spheres on the world stage. However, this wealth and fame did not only translate into positive aspects. The history of Brazil was marked by dark episodes, from the exploitation of the naivety of the native peoples, to plunder their riches, to the political shift from a monarchy to a republic brought about by a coup. Exploitation was not limited to indigenous peoples, but also included Africans and other groups, resulting in one of the most nefarious chapters in human history: slavery. Unfortunately, Brazil became one of the main stages for this inhumane act. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, Brazil stood out as the primary destination for African slaves brought to the New World. Approximately 4.8 million Africans were forcibly brought to Brazilian ports, making the country the largest bastion of slavery in the Americas. This horrendous practice primarily served to enrich sugar plantation owners and the colonial government, as well as the empire that controlled Brazil at that time. This blood-soaked history and relentless pursuit of power are crucial to understanding contemporary Brazil. Moving forward in the timeline to 1889, on November 15th, a pivotal event occurred. The monarchy was overthrown, giving way to a new system of government, the Republic. This milestone represented a significant change in the political and social structure of the country. The word republic has its roots in the Latin res publica, literally meaning public thing, or something belonging to or related to the collective interest. However, the first phase of the Republic in Brazil, known as the República Velha, or Old Republic, was far from reflecting this ideal. Established through a coup led by Marshal Deodoro da Fonseca, The old republic represented a significant change from the monarchy. Despite some advancements, such as the decentralization of power, this phase of the republic was not the period of prosperity and freedom that many might have hoped for. In fact, the political and social structure primarily favored large landowners and local political bosses, coronais, maintaining deep inequalities and perpetuating the exclusion of most of the population from the benefits of the new regime. During a significant period in history, local political bosses, coronais, and provincial leaders held significant power, which allowed them to act with authoritarianism and corruption, often without facing punishment or visible consequences. They engaged in embezzlement of public funds, nepotism, and kept their actions away from public scrutiny, while the central government, in many cases, turned a blind eye to these practices. Furthermore, the right to vote was limited and not universal. Significant segments of the population, such as women and indigenous people, were excluded from political participation, not having the right to vote or influence who governed their country. This political system, where coronais and large landowners held vast power and influence, is known as Coronal Lismo. One notorious aspect of this regime was the so-called voto de cabresto, or halter vote. This expression satirizes how coronais manipulated the votes of the population, controlling them as if they were animals led by halters. This scenario illustrates a time of strict social control and political exclusion in various layers of society. In that historical era, the colonels wielded dominance based on military force and intimidating tactics, including physical aggression and, in some extreme cases, assassinations, with the aim of controlling elections and staying in power at any cost. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that voting was public, eliminating the privacy and security of the secret ballot. Although there was a form of republic in which leaders were theoretically chosen by popular vote, the reality was far from fair elections or true freedom of choice. It was only with the government of Getulio Vargas in the 1930s that the country's economic and political system underwent significant transformations, bringing positive advancements to national politics and expanded rights for women and workers, among others. The implementation of a new constitution and the formation of reformist governments seemed to point to a path towards solving the country's problems. However, these changes were far from completely resolving the existing political and social issues. In October 1993, significant allegations were made by the economist José Carlos Alves dos Santos, triggering a widespread investigation known as the CPI of the budget dwarfs. This parliamentary inquiry committee focused on allegations of fraud committed by members of the Budget Committee of the National Congress of Brazil. In total, 37 lawmakers were accused of involvement in these illicit schemes. Out of this group, 18 had their mandates questioned, but only 6 actually lost their positions, with João Alves de Almeida being one of the most notable. A striking curiosity in this story is Almeida's claim about the origin of his wealth. He attributed his fortune to incredible luck in lotteries, claiming to have won several times. This statement raised suspicion and skepticism. In parallel with these events, on March 16, 1990, during the government of Fernando Collor, a significant economic episode occurred: the confiscation of savings and other financial assets of the population. This drastic measure was taken as an attempt to control the extremely high inflation that plagued the country at the time. The situation in Brazil was marked by a period of turmoil and economic uncertainty, a still vivid memory for those who experienced those moments. The media portrayed a scenario of financial crisis, fueling fears about an increasingly uncertain future for the country. This context illustrates just a few of the countless cases of corruption that have characterized Brazilian history over the centuries. It seems that the country's trajectory has been punctuated by a continuous series of scandals, where leaders who should protect and serve the population end up committing acts of theft and corruption. Far from being a distant problem, these episodes of corruption directly impact the lives of the people. The effects of this reality are evident in the growing poverty and misery that affect a large portion of Brazilian families. Economic and social data reveal an alarming situation. Over 90% of Brazil's population lives on incomes of less than $650 per month, a figure that underscores the depth of the challenges faced by the country. If you earn around $600 or more in Brazil, you belong to the top 10% wealthiest in the country. However, considering the Brazilian context, this amount is not considered high by current standards. Furthermore, Brazil faces serious issues of poverty, with over 17 million people living below the poverty line. The economic situation is even more dire when we look at household debt. In 2022, approximately 80 out of every 100 households were in debt, and worryingly, these debts often cover basic necessities like food and medicine. This scenario reflects a cycle of debt and ongoing social problems, where many Brazilians, despite working hard, including in informal jobs, still live in precarious conditions. This is exacerbated by an economy marked by corruption scandals and a series of social issues that harm the majority of the population. Many of these workers would like to have better opportunities to change their situation. As you can see, not everything in Brazil is about carnival, samba, and soccer. Sometimes reality tends to be disappointing. We've reached the end of our video. Please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment.